Hey there guys, and we are here with the next Prusa Flash Contest. We already entered into the previous one, which was number 65, context number 65, and that was the phone holder one. Looking forward to see how that one goes. Very excited. And this one is game tokens, as you can see right here. Ends in 8 days, so we're about a day behind since these run 9 days. And that is okay, because last time we only had, I actually can't remember how long we had. Might have been 8 days, actually, come to think of it. Regardless, one of these things where you may look at game tokens and you may say, Advent Life, you ain't never designed anything pretty looking before. I know. My response there would be, guess who gets to decide what looks pretty? So yeah. One of these interesting things where I'll admit I have several years ago I downloaded Blender and looked at it and said, you know what, I'll figure this out eventually. And I looked at Mesh Mixer when I got my 3D printer and I said, I'll figure this out eventually. So yeah, mesh designing is not something I have gotten around to figuring out how to do yet. So that gives us, I'm not going to call it a disadvantage, but it definitely limits our tool set. But I will say, and it's one of these things, looked at this contest this morning, started brainstorming what we're going to do, and honestly, it's one of those things, kind of like how I said, you're not the one who gets to decide what pretty is. There's a bunch of different types of art to begin with. So, for example, I'm thinking, just sticking to the tool set that we have right now, I can just go for a polygonal, let's say, a geometrically based art style, one of these postmodern ideas, and we'll go with that. As for what kind of game tokens that we'll be doing, I considered grabbing some random game in. I've got a closet of games, and it's one of those things. I could grab a random game out of that pile. But since I've been streaming a bunch of chess, we may as well do chess. May as well make it on brand for the channel at the moment. So we'll do chess pieces. Let me switch over to camera. As always, I'll link to this contest and the entry info in the description, like judging criteria, so that you can see how all that works. So description of the video, check there if you want more information on that. But like I said, let's swap over to the camera, the notepad, how I normally start this out. So, the first thing to say is, early this morning when I first looked at this contest to see what exactly we were getting ourselves into and, started brainstorming, my first idea, once I settled on chess, before I even got to the art style that we're talking about here, before I even got there, I was like, what would be an interesting idea for chess pieces? And I actually had this idea of doing, let me just get this drawn to get started, doing kind of a Matryoshka doll, however you say that, a nesting doll of chess pieces, where we would create hollow pieces and then stick them inside of each other. And you'd take them apart, separate them in the middle. Take the next piece out, separate it in the middle, take the next piece out. I thought that was an interesting idea. The problem is, well, there's a couple problems. One, I wasn't too confident in getting any good detail. It's actually not that difficult for thinking about it to do regular chess pieces. A lot of them, with the exception of the horsey. There's my horsey. With the exception of the horsey, a lot of chess pieces can be made on a lathe, let's say, which means that they have symmetrical designs, generally speaking, which makes it very easy to do in Fusion, symmetrical and reasonably geometric designs. So most of the pieces, with the exception of the horsey, would not be too difficult to design in Fusion. But it's one of these things I was thinking about, printing it, because printing it is kind of important. And printing this nesting doll thing becomes extremely complicated, because your tolerances need to be really good in order to fit pieces inside of pieces. Like, if we're printing to scale to scale, let's say this is a rook. Basically to scale, maybe a little bit wider here. So this is a little bit wider here. So if this is to scale, printing a bishop, let's say, inside of this, you see how much smaller that bishop to scale all of a sudden is in order to fit inside of the rook. So that's my biggest problem, and the reason I didn't end up going with this. The alternative that I thought about for a little while is actually making normal nesting dolls, like to scale, starting about this big, and then because they're all the same shape, because all the nesting dolls are the same exact shape, we don't lose as much space as over here, and therefore it becomes a lot more feasible. And because they're the same shape, we also have a lot easier time with the tolerances. So if we went ahead with a standard nesting doll shape and then just found some Creative Commons art, fantasy art, let's say, to inlay on here, and one of those things, just put the vector, well, extract the vector, put the vector into Fusion, and then extrude the vector, or either as a what do you call it, embossed or raised, embossed or engraved is what I should say, embossed or engraved. Either doing that in Fusion, that would be relatively straightforward, but it's also extremely boring, frankly. I wasn't very happy with that idea, which brought us on to the next idea, which is, okay, if we can't necessarily nesting doll these, if we don't think we're going to be able to do that, then, and this is my current idea, but I'm going to have to work it out. It's going to be a little difficult. I'm going to have to figure it out. But instead of nesting them, having them pieced together so that our rook piece, and I don't know why I'm drawing this because it's not going to look nothing like this, but the rook piece might intersect with the bishop piece, and that, the negative space in here might fit the horse, etc., etc., etc. So that's the general idea I think we're going with right now. Again, trying to make something that stands out, that has some additional draw to it beyond just being chess pieces, because fact of the matter is that just generic chess pieces, or I should say chess pieces in general, the problem is that chess pieces in general, there's a ton of them out there. You've probably seen a ton of different styles of chess pieces, which gives us a little, I don't want to say that, see, I don't like this idea, this mindset of we're at a disadvantage because this is what we're trying to do. I don't like that mindset. It's one of those things we're just gonna have to I see, even wording it like that, I'm not going to be terribly worried that people have seen chess pieces 1.5 million times before. I'm going to be more worried about making something cool that actually works, because this, in my opinion, I've been on this puzzle box recently with the mechanical deck box, is probably where this is influenced from. This idea of having interlocking pieces that come apart and go together in a specific pattern, that has been a theme that's been in my mind for the past couple of months because of the mechanical deck box and etc. So because that's cool to me right now, because I think this idea of having everything fit together in this pretty formation is an interesting idea. Heck, I mean, if this design even gets to a point where, let's say, the final form of all the pieces put together for a side is a king, that would actually be really cool. If we could get this so that, the horse is here, horse here, bishop here, rook here, etc. If we could do something like that, where the final form actually has some kind of meaning to it, some kind of significance to it, that would be really nice. I'm not holding my breath on this far, but I definitely think we could, at the very least, have everything pieced together and, I don't want to use the term market it, but market it as a travel set, The other thing that I'm thinking about, I've been thinking about this morning before we went live, is how, because I'm doing a stylistically geometric polygonal shape with it, is there anything else I want to add? And I think it would be neat. So if we assume for right now that all our bases are going to be square, I know bases are normally round. Round bases are significantly more difficult to fit together into combined shapes, so that's why I'm starting out with square, and we'll go from there. I mean, maybe we end up with hexagonal, but regardless, if I start with a square shape, then it would be interesting if, for example, let's say we have the rook here. If the rook was in a shape such that the contours of it, like for example the crown, again, chess pieces generally have a base and then an intermediate part and then a crown, is how all chess pieces are created. I mean, even the horse to some degree, you have a base and then the head is kind of the crown, right? It's a large bulbous thing on top. So since all chess pieces have this general geometry, if we can incorporate the pieces movement into that design in an interesting way, that would be very interesting to me. So the rook would be something along this shape. The bishop would have features that go diagonally towards the corners. And then, one of those things, just brainstorming here on the fly. Horse could be, maybe I'm just going to overlap some shapes here, but maybe this kind of Y shape in all directions. I guess this ends up being more octagonal, I guess, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 and 6 is 12. So actually dodecahedral, or not dodecahedral, that's 20. I'm blanking on the shape of 12-sided. But just running, that was not in screen, was it? We're over here for the record. Sorry about that. So anyway, making a Y shape repeated circularly in order to get the horses things. It's one of those things. That's what I'm thinking we're going to go with. How it actually turns out, I guess we'll find out. Let's go ahead and hop into Fusion. Fusion. Okie dokies. Haven't even saved the file yet. Actually, yeah. I'm going to switch back to camera really quick. I know you guys see my file structure over here on the side all the time, but I'm still a little funny about that. So, let's see. New project. Chess pieces. And let's start with, well, see, it's interesting because how exactly to save this as a file is another interesting question. I'm going to start with chess piece as a file, and we'll see what happens. Alright, so welcome back to Fusion. Grab some coffee. Alright, so again, general idea here is to use a square base. And again, the reason we're using a square base instead of a circular base is because circles don't stick together as well. This base may end up being a hex. I don't know. We'll figure that out when we get there. One of those things, just going to take a little bit more thought in order to get there. So I'm going to rough out a chess shape here, and then we'll go ahead and see what we end up with. Again, that is the point of these design streams, is that I'm just going to randomly throw stuff together and we're going to see where we end up. And by randomly, I mean in a very skillful and organized manner and reflecting years of design and professionality. Yep, exactly. Let me open up the browser window really quick because I'm curious whether or not chessboards are generally 1-inch square cells. Chessboard size. Let's see what this link says. Okay, so this one has a list of sizes starting at 1-inch square and going up to 2 3/4 inch square, and it's basing that off of the height of the king piece. Let me mute my phone really quick. Alright, mute phone, mute. Everything, mute everything. There we go. Alright. So, I guess we will design, since this is, again, maybe packaged as a travel kit, let's go ahead and just start with the 1-inch square assumption. And it's saying that the base for the piece would be 3/4 of an inch, so 25% less than the full square. So let's go with that. So 25% less than, well, I'll just do 0.75 inch. And actually, base size equals 0.75 inch. There we go. And I will make this equal for right now. And we can go ahead and how thick do we want this? Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I actually don't even want to just extrude this up. I would feel much more comfortable lofting this, so that's what I'm going to do right now. Okay, whoops, that was silly. Height on the base, though, I guess we'll start with 6 and see where we go from there. It may be, and well, yeah, I mean somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 an inch is probably about right. So somewhere between, up to about 12 millimeters would be our maximum end. So yeah, if we start at 12, I'm happy with that, or if we start at 6 rather, I'm happy with that for now. And for right now, I will just project and offset these. Okay, project and offset. Okay, and then we'll do that. And the offset, how much smaller do we want the base here? Let's go down to 1/2 an inch. So 1/2 an inch would be 25, or no, 0.125 inch on each side. And actually, base size times 3/4, or times 1/4, quarter and quarter. Yeah, times a, no. All right, that is clearly not correct. Base size is 3/4 of an inch. Again, doing math live on stream, for some reason my brain always. So if I have 1 unit size and I want to reduce that by 1/4 on each side, or 1/4 overall, I wanted to reduce it by 1/4 overall, so that should be 1/8 on each side. Okay, 1/8 on each side. Derp. There we go. That's much better. That's what I wanted. Okay. And actually, let's construction line these guys. Turn the other one off so that we actually get the right ones. I hate when I can't double click stuff. There we go. Finish. And now we loft. Okay. Loft. And again, because all this is supposed to piece together, this may change here, but it at least has us started. And let's switch over to white plastic. There we go. Cool. Hopefully you can see that just fine. I can see it fine on my end, in my opinion, but I do realize that the background is white, and this is, even though it says white, it's more of a grayish, beige. I don't even know if it's beige, just more of a gray. So I could understand if you may not be able to see it terribly well. So let us save this, okay? And let us derive it for right now. Again, I'm not entirely sure because I've only spent a couple hours now thinking about this. Not entirely sure how we will go about piecing all these together. So my first thought, my first inclination, and actually let us instead come in here to this construction plane, and I'm going to go ahead and rename that for the future. Top of base, base, top of base. Still not entirely sure, because I only just started thinking about it, how exactly we're going to piece these together. But one thing I do recognize is that if we look at, let's hop back over the camera really quick. If we look at the rook and the bishops, right? If we, again, this is a simplified version, but if we stylize this, these segments do not overlap on these two. So if we cut out the middle part, then in theory, the rook pieces could be something like this. So that is at least one way in which the bishop and the rook could go together. The problem is incorporating everything else into a one solid block, because again, if we just put the rook and the bishops together, then they don't connect either to each. I mean, there's not an obvious way that these pieces then mesh with other pieces, since these features that I'm drawing right here complete themselves into one solid block. So there's no place for the other pieces to piece in. And that's what we're going to have to figure out. So let us see. I guess we're drawing the rook first. And again, we will start out with this, and then we'll see where we go from here. So let us call all that construction lines and turn the body off. And then we're going to go ahead and make these square for right now. We may change our mind and decide that they should be a different shape. And for right now, let us, Control Z. I'm going to do what I have done many times before here and use lines to demarcate halves and quarters, and we will go ahead and have this intersect the quarter mark. So this will be a quarter long, and if we make, actually this would be the bishop. Again, talking like we did before, this would be the bishop because this is in the corner. So we're doing the bishop right now. Pretend like you never heard me say rook. So right now we are going to be ending up leaving, because if this is the rook, that would be centered. Well, this would be centered here. And I'm going to go ahead and equalize this really quick, just so that we have the same scale. So we do have a little, if we use a quarter inch here, a quarter of the size, I should say, not a quarter inch, but a unit size, a quarter of the unit size here, and a quarter of the unit size centered here. That leaves us an eighth of the corner size. Unit size in this gap right here. I mean, assuming that my math is not foobarred. That's a quarter. That's half a quarter. Okay, so this is an eighth. Yeah, that should be an eighth, because a quarter would be from here to here. So yes, that should be an eighth of a unit size right here, which is a space we may be able to use for something else. So we may be able to piece something else in here. So that is why I'm going with a quarter instead of bringing this all the way to the midpoint. At least that's what I've just decided right now, at any rate. That's my decision process right now. So let's go ahead and extrude this guy up. Bodies. And looking over, so it's saying 2-inch king height. I don't know if, you expect the king to necessarily always be the highest. I feel like I've seen chess sets where everything's basically the same size, with the exception of perhaps the horse. So we are going to, from object here, go up 2-inch, and we will join. So that is real lanky, comparative to the base. So we may want to do something with that, but this is at least a start. We'll look at the what we want to do with this going forward, especially because if we look at this, right, actually this is probably like what, 4? Yeah, okay, 3.5. I was going to say 4 millimeters. 4 millimeters is kind of thick. 3.5 feels a bit thinner and feels more prone to breaking, is where I was going with this guy. So we may want to make changes. For example, this base, if we widen it out, this 3.5 would then be more like 4. So only thing we're concerned right now, or the thing that we are concerned at for the moment, I should say, is the fact that that feels very breakable to me, especially since it's probably going to be printed in this orientation. And if it's printed in this orientation, then that means that the layer lines are directly in line with that, and therefore they want to snap. So that does that, and let's see. How do we want to go about this? It's one of those things, in square shapes, you don't really, wish there was a better way than just mid-planing all this, is where I'm getting at here. Actually, I don't even necessarily need mid-planes just because the piece is centered on the origin. I prefer to have mid-planes, but to set up mid-planes, I'm going to have to do plane at angle, here, 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 and then mid-plane all the planes at angles, and that is just way too many planes. Well, it's way too many planes in my opinion. Honestly, it's one of those things. Who cares how many planes you have? The computer doesn't particularly care, so it's not necessarily a problem if you would like to, but I'm going to declare it a problem myself. That is not the correct feature that I wanted. And again, I guess we just leave it on adjust because that's what Fusion has decided is appropriate as a default. Alright, so here is a rough approximate of our bishop piece. I do want to add more features, and we will be able to roll back in the timeline here. So I can roll back into this timeline, add features to this leg here, and then simply select multiple features, select all features before this mirror point, and etc. Same thing over here, and that will propagate the changes forward. So we are safe with that right now. So let me go ahead and save this. Bishop. And we will, actually, before I save that, I should have saved this guy, because now this is going to complain. So let's just update that really quick. Save, okay. And let us derive another piece. Okay, and this will be the rook like I was talking about before. And we will make those construction lines first. That way I don't get so annoyed. And actually, so that is the interesting dilemma there. Yeah, okay, let's hop back to chess piece. We are going to, so we're actually going to roll back and change things significantly. So let us change parameters. And actually, no, don't change parameters. Come in here. And we will do base offset equals. We'll do that. And then now we will finish, modify, change parameters, and then come in here. User defined top of base. I don't particularly care that it's in millimeters when everything else is in inches. And this will be base size minus 2 times base offset, and that will give us the top of the base's square size. Again, this works for right now because we're using a square. We will have to make adjustments here later on if we change it to a different shape. So let's go ahead and say okay, and I'm going to go ahead and favorite that guy. And we can go ahead and save. And let's hop back into the bishop. And I'm going to go ahead and update first, but I'm going to come in here and change this derive to include everything, all the for a future use. And now we'll come back down here, and instead of having this based on these, let me turn this off really quick. I want the dotted line there. Alright, so I got rid of all the lines that do anything here, and now I can go ahead and do actually first come up here to that and come down to chess piece. Nope. Chess piece. There we go. User parameters. Top of base. Okay. Top of base divided by 4. We did 4 before, right? Yeah, 3.75. Yeah. So that's correct. All right. So now if we change the base, the top of the base size, so if that gets bigger or smaller, this bishop will automatically update to accommodate that. And further, it makes our life easier over here on the rook, because the problem I was running into over here on the rook, let me just finish an update really quick. Update and make all those changes I just did for the bishop. So the problem I was running into over here on the rook is that, and sorry, I just realized I didn't have something up on my other monitor. All right. The problem is that whereas the bishop, we could draw these lines in to determine what a quarter of the top here was, we couldn't do that with the rook. We couldn't do that easily, I should say, with the rook. So now, instead of having to jump through a bunch of hoops in order to get this sized correctly, now we can just use, never mind, change parameters, users, and star. Okay. Top of base ref. Divide by 4. Derp. There we go. And now we are good. Just do that. Okay. And then we are going to go ahead and turn the body off. Actually, next thing that I should do, and we didn't do before, is add an overall height. And I will change this one to 2 inches just because. 2, okay. Save that. Come back over to bishop, and we'll make sure that this is all uniform. Make sure this is all uniform. And come down here. Where is it? Did I not just update the parameters? Huh. Where is my overall height parameter? That's updated. We hit the update button. Did I not save the parameter? Oh. Gotta star it. I forgot about that one. My mistake. Alright. So now let's update. Change parameters. And then star it. That is one of the more obnoxious things about parameters. In between having to star everything and having a bunch of underscore ref, which really should not be the case. There really should be scoping. You should be able to navigate through scopes. Unfortunately, that is not how the world works, so we're just gonna have to deal with it. Overall height ref, and now this is up to date, and we'll update if we have to change the piece heights. So let's go over here and get this guy figured out, or finished off. From object, from the base, and our distance is overall. Oh. Update our links, go to change parameters, hit the star button, extrude bodies from object, and overall height dot ref. Whoops. And we got to make sure that's not a cut. We want to make sure that's a join. And now So it's one of these interesting things, right? It wasn't going to work on the corner pieces, but for this one it should work. Circle pattern, features. Click that. Click the origin. And go to 4. And hit OK. Yeah, there we go. Funny thing that. Let me just hop back over here and make sure I wasn't going insane. For some reason I was thinking from past experiences that this wasn't going to work, which is why I mirrored everything, but I might just be I am insane. Good. I wonder why. I swear the last time I went to circle extrude something like this in a square shape, it didn't work, and I'm trying to figure out why that was. There's probably a reason for it, but I'll have to figure that one out later. Alright, saved. Come over here, save the rook. Okie dokies. Yep, editables. Let us come down here and drive the next piece. And again, for right now, we are just getting everything set up. I still got to, as mentioned before, determine how exactly we're going to piece all these together, and that may come down to making further modifications, coming back to these pieces and changing how they fit together later on. First thing I'm thinking, actually, so I'm thinking more about this now, and because we have this center point open here, if we overlap the bishop, let's hit this and try to line this up so that you can see it more easily when I jump back and forth. So since that center point is going to be open, that at least gives us, if we wanted to, space to put the pawn, not the pawns, but the actually, yeah, we could pile the pawns in there. We could make the pawns a different base, like straight up base, as in just make them low pillars if we wanted to, and then they could slide into that gap. The alternative that I was thinking, though, was that the king and the queen could piece directly through the center. We could hollow this out, put a hole in here, and then piece the king and the queen through the bishop and the rooks themselves, although we have 2 bishops and 2 rooks, which means that we have 2 assemblies, and we can put 1, 2, 3, 4, so we have room for 4 more pieces, and that would be the let me go ahead and hop over to camera so you can see how my mind's working. So right now we have, I'm going to try to draw this orthogonally, or however you would say that. So pretend that this is the rook right here, and then we have the bishop right here, and this goes like this. Bum, bum. Or actually, that probably should go like that. Okay, so here's the bishop intersecting the rook. Okay, I'm not going to draw the extra feet because they just get in the way. We put a hole in here, and now the king and the queen, in theory, could be single pieces, but so long as the hole is big enough, and that might be a little bit small right there in the drawing, but so long as the hole is big enough, you could put the, let's say, queen through like this, and just imagine this going flush, right? So this then feeds all the way through, and this base, the top of this base, is flush against the bottom of that base. So that gives us a starting point for getting this all pieced together. So that would be the queen in on this side. We could do the king in on this side. coming like this. How do I draw this? Yeah, you get the idea. So the king slides in this side, the queen slides in that side, let's say. And then we have now the knights. The knights would be the only pieces that we'd have to figure out for the other pair of rook and bishop, the black bishop, let's say, and the queenside rook. Then, so long as we design the knight so that it could do the same exact thing that we're doing with the king and queen here. The king and queen are easy because they're cylindrical pieces. The knights, though, as we discussed earlier, knights are generally weird shapes. However, as my mind is working here, one of those things, artistic style idea time. You know, if we made more of a snake-like horse, one of those things most people would pick up immediately that, okay, that is obviously, because it's not cylindrical like all the other pieces, that could be the knight. Only problem with that idea is that, again, our previous idea was to have the directions demarked by how the piece was shaped, and that becomes a problem with this knight. So our knight, again, we kind of want to have making a Y shape, and this is a problem on multiple ways because A, it's going to be a problem getting pieced into this idea that we have working right here, and B, it's going to have a hard time looking like a knight is actually the problem. Now, on the one hand, again, back to artistic merit and art being symbolic, you know, if art is being symbolic and the pieces of art are supposed to represent things, then it doesn't necessarily matter whether or not the knight looks like a horse. If it reflects its movement, then you can say artistically, well, it is representative of a knight. So anyway, I'm going to hop back into Fusion now because I've drawn everything I want to draw. This is something that we're going to have to consider, and it is something that we may be able to solve as I'm thinking through this more and more. One of two ways. First off, if we look at, let me hop over to the bishop maybe. Yeah, I could probably do it here. So the queen could, in theory, piece, the queen and the king could, in theory, piece into just the bishops, is now where I'm thinking. Maybe. And my idea here is that if I use this whole entire space right here, so let me go ahead and just start up a sketch so that you can see what I'm thinking here. Using this whole entire space, we could draw, create a design rather, that is something to the effect of this. So whereas the bishop and the rook are squares, the king and queens can be a bunch of triangles put together. And you see how I can use extended star shapes to go the cardinal directions, and use smaller star shapes in between for the diagonals. So the queen could fit into the bishop like that, and the only question then is the rook, because the queen and the king could fit into the two bishops coming from the bottom side, as we were discussing earlier, because that dodges these pillars and it doesn't look bad. I mean, obviously my drawing right now looks a little bad, but once I get it, you know, properly defined, have dimensions confined, have it well designed, etc., etc., etc. Just keep on rhymes. King and the queen could fit into the bishop side. Couldn't fit into the bishops. The rooks, then, you see how the rook actually, we have our diagonals here that we wanted for the knight. So we go ahead and the knight back to could look something like, come on, Fusion. Something like this, I'm thinking. So that's, you know, square. Here's my squares. So this right here draw one more square here. This right here represents go one and then go diagonal. and then we'd have the other one over here. So this is looking to me like this might work here. That, and then go diagonal there. That, go diagonal there. It's looking like it's piecing together to me, right? This is starting to take shape in my mind, so I'm actually feeling pretty good at this point about these pieces nesting together in this orientation. Again, the 2 inches here feels way too unsafe to me. Now, the one thing we could do is, these are boring squares right here. We could turn them into triangles or octagons or hexagons. You know, any of those things. And that would make me feel better about their stiffness. I don't know why. I can't exactly explain that. So, the square shape just feels more flimsy to me. Whoa, sorry. Wrong pipe. One sec. All right. So, yeah. All right. Everything. We'll make those changes when we get there. The one thing that this does is, if each rook gets one knight and each bishop gets one king / queen, and those pieces all the way through here, then I'm not sure how the bishops and the rooks are intersecting then at that point. Alright, basically what just happened there is I have trees getting cut down outside my room, and I was curious. I was watching the microphone meter, even though it was muted, to see how much of that you're picking up. You're picking up a good amount of it, unfortunately, but I don't know that it's necessarily without tuning into this. Actually, let me do that really quick. Let me tune into the stream really quick and see how that sounds. I was going to say, it doesn't look like it's terribly loud on the microphone, but let me just check. Meter out of it, unfortunately, but I don't know that it's necessarily without tuning into it. Actually, let me do that really quick. Let me. Curious. I was watching the microphone meter, even though it was muted, to see how much of that you're picking up. You're picking up a good amount of it, unfortunately, but I don't know that it's necessarily without tuning into this. Actually, let me do that really quick. Let me tune into the stream really quick and see how that sounds. I was going to say, it doesn't look like it's terribly loud on the microphone, but let me just check. Alright. Again, apologizing for that one. I don't know. It's hard for me to tell with the headphones I'm using right now whether or not what I'm hearing on stream is coming from the outside or from the headphones. So, let us go ahead and stop for right now. It's one of those things that's been about an hour, and one of those things I planned on streaming multiple times this weekend anyway, so we will go ahead and just pick up later. So we've made a good amount of progress. Largely what's left, because we have a decent game plan of how to get these together, is connecting all these separate pieces and adding stylized features to all of them. So that actually shouldn't be too difficult to do going forward. Basically, since we have a good idea of how all these pieces are going to fit together, for that reason, all we have to do then is figure out how to get the pawns together, and then how to get these 4 sets of blocks that we're basically making put together. And I think in my mind that they could fit together because there are 4 pairs of pieces. That 4 pairs of pieces makes a square, and then the connecting pieces could be the pawns, is where my brain is going right now. One of those things, again, I prefer to stream, for another hour and get to that point, especially because video editing has been taking me entirely too long, and I want to, make sure that I have this project completed prior to, or a good bit earlier than the last one was relative to the end of the contest. Unfortunately, the universe is not exactly going to cooperate with me today, so we will go ahead and stop here and get all that done when the world is a more quiet place. So thank you for your patience, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great wow, okay. I hope you have a great and wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at in the world, and I will catch you next time.